we live our lives through our nervous system. Every one of us. It doesn't matter if you're a day old or 100 years old. Every organ, every muscle, every gland, every tissue, every single cell in the body knows exactly what to do, when to do it, and how to do it because the brain tells it so, right? Every flower you smell, every joke you laugh at, and every kiss you feel is all processed through the nervous system. There is nothing in the human experience outside the realm of the nervous system. So we want to make sure that nervous system is functioning optimally at all times. And another thing we want to understand is that our nervous system is broken into basically two different types of nerves. Nerves that feel things called sensory and nerves that do things called motor, right? And most people think we're filled with sensory nerves, right? But interestingly, 65 to 75% of the nerves in the body are motor. Only about 25 to 35% feel things. And of the 25 to 35% that feel, only about 5% sense pain.
Welcome to the Soaring Child podcast, where parents of children with ADHD learn tips and tricks to help their child soar at home, at school, and in life. We feature interviews with experts, medical professionals, and parents just like you who are learning how to reduce ADHD symptoms using food and other natural strategies. Because children with ADHD deserve to soar just like every other child. I'm Dana Kay, your host. Now it's time to welcome Brian Stenzler to the Soaring Child. Hi, Brian. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, Don. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I am more than welcome, and I'm super excited to have you on the show. I know so many of our listeners always, ask questions about chiropractic care and ADHD, and that's why I'm so extra excited for you to come and join us today. I know, looking back at your history, being a practicing chiropractor, I know that you taught neurology many years ago, which is amazing, and the nervous system was your focus in practicing as a chiropractor. We know that, when it comes to ADHD, these kiddos' nervous systems are in total overdrive. Can you just give us a bit of an insight about what types of stressors in our lives can negatively impact the function of the nervous system?
Yeah, for sure. So I always bring it back to chemical, emotional, and physical stressors are the cause of most dis-ease processes, the inability to adapt to them. We need stressors in our lives. We need stress in our lives. Stress is ultimately how the body adapts to stressors. And if we don't adapt well to them, we end up with dis-ease, disharmony, disconnect. So some examples of some chemical stressors can be foods that we consume, like sugars, meat for certain people could be a problem, some digestive things, whether it has pesticides or it's genetically modified, you have an allergy to it or a sensitivity. Lots and lots of food that we consume could be chemical stressors. Pollution that people breathe in and other toxins in the air, drugs that people take, whether they're pushed or prescribed. I mean, there are chemicals, there are medications out there that may be life-saving, but they're still chemical stressors. Totally. We need to find ways to detoxify ourselves and get those stressors out of the body. So those are examples of some chemical stressors, and there's many more than what I just talked about. But, in the book, we talk a lot about the different types of the stressors that we have. Then you've got emotional stressors, right? So you're dealing with kids, for example, you're dealing with sibling rivalry, school, parents, maybe the parents aren't getting along with it, parenting differently. Other people, even adults that deal with emotional stressors could be relationship stuff, job stuff, financial stuff, lots and lots of emotional stressors that are out there. And then there's physical stressors, which can be, a fall, a car accident, having poor posture, not exercising properly if you're an adult, or, not learning how to crawl properly as a kid. One of the things that a lot of parents do is they have their kids walk too soon and they don't develop the curves properly in the spine, which affects the nervous system in a negative way. And then another major physical stressor is, of course, what we'll talk about in a bit would be the subluxation, where you have misaligned vertebrae that it's irritating the nerve pathways and doesn't allow optimal communication between the brain and the body. So those are the 50,000 view of chemical, physical, and emotional stressors.
Yeah, interesting. What about birth stresses?
Oh, and birth stress, yes. And that includes all of them. I actually mentioned that you did read my book, I imagine, so you got that. Yes. So birth stress has all three of them. You've got, first off, from the chemical stressors is different things coming in the mom's nutrition, could be a chemical stressor, the emotional stressor of being born. It's like we delivered my son at home. So we did a home birth and, he didn't have the same amount of stressors as the normal hospital birth. When they come in, there's usually loud noises, there's beeping, there's bright lights. And then the pushing on top of that adds for a physical stress, the torquing of the head and the neck, depending on the doctor, or if it's a midwife. So yeah, birth trauma is one of the most common physical stressors that even, creates those subluxations that we had talked about. Yeah.
Wow. And look, I think there should be chiropractors at the hospital after you give birth so they can, fix those alignments straight up off the mark. A lot of the time, and I know with my son, I had absolutely no idea about needing to go and align his spine after birth. But for him, that was one of the stresses that were contributing to his ADHD symptoms. So definitely. So when a child's born, what age is good for them to get that alignment started? Is it straight from birth? Is it in a couple of months?
Yeah, it's a great question. So a child would need to be realigned when they're not in alignment. So if it's at birth, during the birth process, that's when it should happen. If it's 3 months after birth, that's when it should happen. And so that's why it's good to have a chiropractor on your healthcare team to make sure that everything is where it needs to be. A kid is not going to tell you, hey, my neck hurts or I have a headache. When they're a baby, a newborn, they're not going to be able to communicate that. My son, we had a very uneventful childbirth, which was fantastic, but the cord was wrapped around his neck a few times. And so when I caught him, the midwife told me, she showed me how to maneuver and stuff like that to uncatch it and everything. And I got a little nervous, but she had faith in me. And immediately after he was unraveled, as I was handing him to my wife, I was doing a delicate adjustment on his spine because that caused misalignments in the neck. Wow. And he went from being pretty much listless to having full energy and hasn't stopped.
Maybe you want to put him back. No, yeah, my boys are boundless with energy as well. So that's so interesting. But you've obviously got an insight in knowing whether or not your son has a misalignment or not. So obviously having that chiropractor on your team is really beneficial. I always talk about when working with kids with ADHD, and I think as parents in general, we are trying to bake a pie. And you're going to be like, okay, how does this work? But there are many ingredients to the pie, and you want to bake a good pie. It doesn't need to be the most amazing pie, but you just want to bake a good pie that's successful, successful in the bakery sale. I don't know, whatever. I know this is completely off topic, but chiropractic care is one of those ingredients. And having that chiropractor on your team from birth is a very good thing to have. So, I know that when you were practicing, you were a pediatric and family wellness chiropractor. Can you talk to us how chiropractic care can really impact the function of the nervous system, but also help our kiddos with ADHD?
Yeah, for sure. So, one of the premises that we have to understand starting back is that we live our lives through our nervous system. Every one of us. It doesn't matter if you're a day old or 100 years old. Every organ, every muscle, every gland, every tissue, every single cell in the body knows exactly what to do, when to do it, and how to do it because the brain tells it so. Right? Every flower you smell, every joke you laugh at, and every kiss you feel is all processed through the nervous system. There is nothing in the human experience outside the realm of the nervous system. So we want to make sure that nervous system is functioning optimally at all times. And another thing we want to understand is that our nervous system is broken into basically two different types of nerves. Nerves that feel things called sensory and nerves that do things called motor, right? And most people think we're filled with sensory nerves, right? But interestingly, 65 to 75% of the nerves in the body are motor. Only about 25 to 35% feel things. And of the 25 to 35% that feel, only about 5% sense pain. So that means that more than 95% of our human experience has nothing to do with how we feel in terms of pain. Yet when do most people go to a doctor, like when they have pain, right? When something is bothering them that they're aware of. So first and foremost, like you said, baking the cake. I talk about laundry, like doing laundry. Like people like, well, should I do chiropractic? Should I do acupuncture? Should I do naturopathy? Should I do homeopathy? Should I exercise?
Yes.
Yeah. It's like if you're doing a wash and you want your clothes clean, you can use detergent, you can use water, you can use maybe fabric softener or something, So that's the cake, the laundry thing. I like the cake better though.
Yeah, I like the cake better. And kids, kids eat lots of cake.
Right, exactly.
We're going to talk about sugar on another day, but
right. Sugar-free, organic, non-GMO cake, right?
1,000%.
So when it comes to ADD, ADHD, or any other disorder, it all comes down to the same, to the type of chiropractor that was like me, that would practice, about the nervous system, that the first thing we want to do is always let the parent know we're not there to treat any disease or condition. Mm-hmm. We're looking to see how the nervous system is functioning. So I'd like to tell a story about one of my very first families that I took care of in practice. I won't mention names because she's still tangentially involved and we're going back 23 plus years. But she was the school nurse at a local elementary school. Mm-hmm. And she calls me up one day, and I knew her because my stepmom was the principal of that school. And so she calls up, she goes, I understand you're a chiropractor, and my son was diagnosed with ADHD, mm-hmm. and he was told that he needs to get on Ritalin. They want to get on medication. She's like, I'm the school nurse. I administer Ritalin and all the other medications to the kids. I don't want that to be my son's destiny. I just don't want that. She's like, and I was doing research and all my friends were saying, I need to take him to a chiropractor. Sounds ridiculous to me. She says, I don't know how neck pain or back pain would have anything to do with ADHD. Mm-hmm. But I want to give this chiropractic thing a shot. And I know you take care of a lot of people at the school and other families that come here. Do you think you can help my son? And he was 8 at the time. And I said, well, I know I can analyze him, and I know that I certainly won't do anything that would make him worse. Mm-hmm. So let's take a look. So I did a scan on him, which I highly recommend to all of your viewers and listeners right now. Mm-hmm. It's something called a surface electromyography, SEMG, and I did a thermal scan.
And what is it? Is it a machine or is it a...
I'm going to explain that in a second.
Okay.
And heart rate variability, I didn't have at the time, but I wish I had, because I did that on all my ADHD kids later on. Mm-hmm. You know about HRV. Mm-hmm. So surface EMG, it's just basically, it's a non-invasive tool that basically, it's like an EKG.
Yes.
Like you put pads on you. So instead of putting it on the heart, on the chest, you put it on the back. Mm-hmm. It's these electrodes, nothing goes into the body. So we can do it on kids. We could do it on pregnant women, totally non-invasive. And what it measures is how much voltage, because the way muscles contract and relax is by voltage going to them. Okay. And that's how everything works. It's all electrical charges. That's the brain sends electrical charges to every cell in the body. And that's how they perform the functions they're supposed to perform. So it's measuring how much voltage is going from the brain down the spinal cord, out the nerves to those paraspinal muscles, the muscles right alongside the spine. Yeah. And it tells us, are the muscles contracting too much, too little, and are they equal on both sides, right? And it's not that I care that much about the muscles, but I know that the organs and glands are also beneath those muscles. So it gives us information. And so in a normal scan, the bars at certain areas would be white, and then green would be a mild hyperactivity, meaning more nerve energy than there should be. Blue would be moderate, and red would be severe. And then black is like off the charts. When I did this boy's scan, almost every single section was red, like from the top to the bottom, and it was asymmetrical. And I looked at her and she got glassy eyed because she knew what we were looking for and stuff. And, 23 years of practice, I never did scare care. That was never my thing. I always came from a place of love and life as opposed to scaring them. She looked at it and, she said to me, it doesn't look like his nervous system is working as well as it could. Does it? And I said, yeah, I don't think he has ADHD because of lack of Ritalin in his body. I think there's something going on with his nervous system. And of course she agreed, and I use this analogy that imagine taking a pebble and putting the pebble in your shoe, and you've got to walk around with that pebble all day long.
That is really annoying.
Right? How long would it take before your foot got irritated? Maybe it'll affect the way that you walk. So your knee, maybe it'll affect your hip. And eventually maybe you get a headache. Yeah. And then after enough time, maybe you snap at your parents, your teachers, your children, whoever it is, and you just can't concentrate. You can't focus. Now, instead of that pebble being in your shoe, and put it in your spine at the point of your neck. And you think, how are these kids going to process the world and process life with that type of impingement, that type of distortion in their nervous system?
And so so when you see something like that, is it coming from a misalignment in the neck and then it just affects the rest of the spine? Is that how it works?
Yeah. So it's interesting because the spine works as a kinetic chain or a chain of motion, right? Yeah. So there's 24 movable vertebrae in the spine, all the way from the neck down to the tailbone. And if you were to move one bone, one vertebra in the spine, it's going to affect tension on every single bone. So there are times that somebody has, say headaches or pain in the neck and it's coming from the low back. Yep. There are times that people have lack of concentration and it's coming from the low back and it affects all the way up to the neck. So that's why, as a chiropractor, the way that I practiced was I never based where I was going to adjust based on the symptom. I did it based on what I found to be out of adjustment. What is not properly aligned? Where is the nerve interference? And fix it. Now, more times than not with ADHD, it's almost always the atlas, the top bone in the neck, and the axis below it. Those are almost always involved. They're not always the only ones, but they're almost always involved. And sometimes just by clearing the atlas, adjusting the atlas, the rest of the spine will follow.
That's so interesting. And so when that's out of adjustment or any other part is out of adjustment, you can get these symptoms of, is it like brain fog, inattention? What about the other side, like the hyperactivity and the emotional dysregulation? What about those sort of symptoms?
Yeah, of course, because what's happening is, I'm going to get very simplistic here, right? And there's not a lot of science that, I'd have to explain with things with like fat tissue. And everything. Let's just go very simplistic for a moment. You have a garden hose and imagine you're watering flowers and you squeeze the hose a little bit, it makes the water spurt out really hard.
Yep.
And if you squeeze the hose a lot, it makes the water dribble out. Either way, those flowers are going to die because you're either pounding them with too much water or you're not getting enough water. So the hyperactivity kind of goes around with hypertonicity, hypertonic muscles, where there's too much tension. Tonic tension, right? There's too much tension going in there and it could make it like you're putting too much voltage and it just makes the kid not be able to focus and they're wired. They're all over the place. Wow. And so that is one of the many ways that being out of adjustment or being subluxated is the word that we would use in chiropractic, which is basically bone out of place that irritates the nerve flow, miscommunicating between the brain and the body. So it definitely, that can create a hyperactive child because they're not able to process it. And then they can have some really high highs and then they have some really low lows also, because then they got to reset at some point.
Okay. So just repeat for the listeners. Listeners, grab your pens and paper and write down what that scan was called again. So just repeat it for us.
Surface electromyography, SEMG.
Awesome. And do most chiropractics use that, or do you have to go searching out there?
I wish most chiropractors, a lot do, thousands and thousands do. But we have over 70,000 chiropractors in America. And I don't know, maybe 5 to 10,000 have the units now. Okay. So you can go to, I think there's a website, subluxation.com, I think is the website that you can look, and we could put in the show notes afterwards, where you could do find a chiropractor. I know the last time I looked, which was several months ago, they were updating it. But also anyone could reach out to me because I know you'll have my contact info in there. I'll be happy to refer somebody, refer them to a chiropractor wherever it is that they live. If I could find someone near them that use the technology and have experience working with children, particularly with ADHD.
Yes.
I was president of the California Chiropractic Association. I'm currently vice president of an organization called the Congress of Chiropractic State Association. So I have access to every state association's president. So I can find somebody who can help some of your listeners.
Amazing. What an amazing resource, Brian. So thank you very, very much for that. Okay, so we've done a scan on our kiddo and we see all of this going on or not going on, and it needs to be going on in their spine and their neurosystem and things like that. So when that happens and when families with kids with ADHD are at the chiropractor, what does the treatment, well, I know it's not treatment, sorry, I take that back. What does the plan look like? What does the healing plan look like in terms of trying to fix what we find?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. There's a lot that goes into it because the first thing we want to know is how old is the child? How long have they been subluxated or out of adjustment for? What is their lifestyle like? Like, what is their diet? You know, what caused this in the first place? Was it trauma that caused the subluxation, or was it the result of like too much sugar and, you know, too many chemical stressors?
So stopping there for 1 second. So you're saying that you can have an out of alignment from those chemical stressors as well as, or a bad diet.
Yes. Chemical, physical, and emotional stressors are ultimately what cause us to go out of adjustment.
Wow.
People think that you have to be hit or something or have a bad birth trauma in order to get out of adjustment. But those chemical stressors, they cause dehydration from the muscle. So it causes pulling and everything. Physical stresses are obvious. Emotional stressors, you know, you get tension in the shoulders and the neck and the low back. So all of those stressors that I mentioned at the top of the show are what cause you to go out of adjustment in the first place. So I always want to know, well, what caused them? Because I don't want to be the hammer just constantly knocking nails in.
Yes.
Right. So the course of care is going to be determined by the severity of the subluxation pattern. How long have they been out of adjustment for? What is their lifestyle like? What is their commitment? We have some kids that might need 2 or 3 times a week, some kids once a week, some kids once every 3 weeks, some kids 5 times a week in the beginning.
Wow.
All depends on what it takes to reset that nervous system. A word I like to use, one of my mentors used to talk about rehabituation rather than rehabilitation. Rehabituation. We want to create new habits for not only lifestyle, but for the muscles to settle in to their current place. So if it's a young child, you know, you're talking 3, 4, 5 years old, they're going to typically respond much quicker than a child who's 10, 12, 14 years old, who's got many more years of it. But ultimately, it's going to come down to what are you doing between the adjustments? Then in terms of what the adjustment looks like, that also depends on the age of the child. For a younger child, 3, 4, 5 years old, we might be just doing what's called sustained contact, where you're just basically pushing on certain areas where it would be like the pressure you put on a tomato before even denting the tomato. Or we might use an activator, a little clicking instrument that helps adjust it, you know, kind of like designed after a dental impact, which just uses really quick force to realign. So it makes a clicking sound, but the person feels nothing. Or we might do a manual adjustment where you hear that popping in the neck or whatever it is, all depending on the child's, you know, comfort level and what's safe for them, because you don't want to do anything that would harm the child, of course. And also we have to remember that a lot of kids that do come in with ADHD also come in with other issues too. So, you know, whether they're on the spectrum or that's the
sensory processing, that's a big one. Anxiety.
100%. So we've got to see what it is. And then I have other kids that come in that the parents swear that they have ADHD and they don't. You know, they're just either not parented properly or they're just eating way too much sugar and off the wall. And so some of those cases are harder because it's not the subluxation that's causing it. It's something outside of the chiropractor.
Yeah. And that's an interesting one. And I talk about it a lot about, I would say, about 50% of the kids that come to me, we change the diet and their symptoms disappear.
Yep.
And so that tells me that they were wrongly diagnosed. So you are exactly right there. And that's why we need to look at all the different ingredients and bring them in to bake the best possible pie. It's not just popping one pill and all of those symptoms disappear. It's going and getting all those good ingredients. So there's lots of different ways, and depending on the child's age and depending on what they're comfortable with and what the parents are comfortable with, once you go through, just say we chose a plan that was, 3 times a week, would that typically go for a month, 2 months, and then into a maintenance? How does that work?
Yeah. So what happens is, the way I always divided it up was I go into corrective care. We start with, what do we have to do to start making the correction? Right. And then, well, actually the first, if somebody came in with a symptom, then that might be like the critical care stage or the crisis care, right? So that's when they're in 3 times a week, say. That would be like a worst case scenario type of thing, 3 or more times a week. Then they get into correction. Once, if it's a pain thing, maybe there's inflammation, or maybe if you're dealing with ADHD, it's like they're off the wall at this point and the parents and teachers don't know what to do. So they're in a critical phase. So they might be 3 times a week for 2 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks, depending on how long it takes. Then they get into corrective care, where maybe now they're coming twice a week or once a week or once every 10 days. It should be getting more and more spread out over time, because as the body is correcting, it's holding the adjustments. They're holding the adjustments longer, as long as you're keeping the chemical, physical, and emotional stressors at bay.
Yes.
Right? If they have the same lifestyle, they might be on 3 times a week forever. Yes. And that defeats the whole purpose of what we're doing.
100% agree. And, it's like I get a lot of parents asking me questions about what supplements are good for focus or good for hyperactivity. You can't supplement out of a bad diet. Diet's the foundation of everything. That lifestyle is the foundation of everything. And so it's like the same. You can't chiropractic care out of a bad diet or a bad lifestyle.
That's right. And one of my mentors, Dane Donahue, says you can't medicate yourself out of something created by your lifestyle.
Yes.
It's like you've got to change what's in your lifestyle first. That's what I've dedicated my life to doing, is helping them make these changes so they don't rely on us as practitioners, but more as coaches. Where we can help guide them and be their hero, be their mentors. And so, they should get to a point after it's been corrected and their lifestyle is helping keep things at bay. Then they could get to what's called lifestyle care, or what you refer to as maintenance. I don't use the word maintenance because you maintain a car, not a person, right? Nobody wants to maintain and just be status quo. We want to be better and better and better every day, right?
Totally.
So I call it wellness care or lifestyle care. And that is where you're coming on an as needed basis, not as needed based on how you feel, but based on how you function. So how long you can go without going out of adjustment. For some people, they're going to be once a week forever. For some, it might be once a month. For some, it might be twice a year. The intensity of someone's lifestyle care will ultimately be determined by the intensity of their lifestyle.
Yes.
The more they beat themselves up and fewer good things they do for themselves, the more they need to see the chiropractor. The more good things they do for themselves, the less they need to see the chiropractor.
I love that. I am going to totally use that as a quote because I think that just sums it all up. So that's fantastic. Now, I know we've talked a lot about ADHD and chiropractic care, but I know that you wrote an amazing book, which I have right here, which I love. Please tell our listeners, what does the acronym DREAM stand for? And I don't think I've ever asked you.
Well, it's in the book. So
yes.
So DREAM is an acronym for the 5 keys to the wellness lifestyle, being diet, relaxation, exercise, being an adjustment, and mental wellness. So diet is everything that goes into the body from the outside world to the inside world. It's everything you eat, drink, taste, touch, smell, feel, hear. All the movies you watch and all the people you spend time with is just as much part of your diet as the food you consume. You put garbage in, you get garbage out, like the old computer term GIGO. Right?
Gigo. I haven't heard of it.
Yeah. Oh, that's an American term that we use.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Then there's relaxation. That's giving your body a chance to call time out, to reset, repair, regenerate, and rejuvenate yourself. E is for exercise, any activity that requires physical or mental exertion. Skip A for a moment. M is for mental wellness. That's connecting your inner purpose and passion to your outer goals and tasks in all phases of life, being right with your self-esteem, self-worth, self-values, and so on and so forth. The process of creating a life where instead of waking up in the morning being like, oh God, it's morning, you're like, oh God, it's morning. Like you're excited about it.
Yes.
And when you have a strong DREM, you should stay in A, which is in adjustment, which is being in balance mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally, and having optimal brain-body communication through the nervous system. And that is how we avoid and neutralize chemical, physical, and emotional stressors.
I just love how you sum that up. And if anyone is interested in, knowing more about that, you should definitely get Brian's book, which we'll link down below in the show notes. Well, it'll be below, I think. So you went over a ton of lifestyle stresses that, every family is bombarded with on a daily basis. Let's just summarize quickly, or let's look at what are the first and most important changes that you recommend a parent should start with. I know what I recommend, but I want to know what you recommend, and how does that play into what you call the dream score, which you include in this book. So how's that for you? So
thank you. That's perfect. So the first thing I would say, if you have to do one thing, I say you take the dream score, because everybody's starting somewhere different. Like I should say, you know what? Everyone should have their kid checked by a chiropractor to check the nervous system, right? And I could also say everyone should be checking how much sugar or corn syrup their kid is eating.
Yes.
Or everyone should say they should get their kids off their computers, off their screens. there is no one thing that's more important because I don't know where they're starting from. Maybe they already have a chiropractor on the team. Maybe they don't have sugar in the house. Maybe they don't use iPads and things like that. The Dream Score is about an 85-question lifestyle assessment tool. It takes about 20 to 25 minutes to perform. It's free. And what it will do is let you know basically where you are as a parent in your wellness walk. And then it predicts where your child is and where they're going to be. It's a predictor of your child's current and future health. So this way, you know what changes need to be made in the household. My book, as you know, you just held it up there for those that are able to see this. It's over 350 pages long. That is quite a chore for any busy parent to get through. I understand that. I wish I could have made it 20 pages, but it's 350 pages. But the idea is if you don't have the time to read the whole book, you take the Dream Score and it tells you exactly what pages you need to read based on where you currently are in your lifestyle. So for example, if you're not conscious of the sugar, it's going to tell you the sugar chapters to read. So you can actually get through the entire book in under an hour by taking the Dream Score first.
That is amazing. And I think that is just such a wonderful way to look at it for parents, because you can use it more as a manual than like reading it from, start to finish, because it is. Parents these days, we are all so busy. So I think that is a wonderful way that they can really use this as their manual in their back pocket to go, okay, well, here we are in the Dream Score. We need to focus this month on sugar. I'm going to go to the sugar pages. Or this month we need to focus on environmental toxins and I'm going to go to those pages. So that's wonderful, Brian. Look, Brian, I think we're out of time today, but I have to say this episode has just given me so much to think about. And I want your suggestions on a chiropractor here in Seattle, Washington that uses that scan as well. So stay on after we finish this episode, because I'll definitely pick your brains on that one. And I feel like I need one too. Just sitting here and hearing you talking about those adjustments, I'm like, yep, definitely need to go to a chiropractor right now. Such a wealth of information. Brian, thanks so much for joining today and sharing your knowledge and just experience with all our listeners. Please tell our listeners where they can find and follow you online.
Online, I have a website, drbrianstenzler.com. That's drbrianstenzler.com with an I. On Instagram, at Dr. Brian Stenzler. Facebook, I'm the only Brian Stenzler on Facebook. And I have a Dream Family Facebook page. You can always find it through my thing. So people could just hit me up and let me know how they found me. And of course, if they take the Dream Score, they'll start getting my blog. So lots of great stuff. I'm easily found.
And we'll definitely put all of those links in the show notes below. But fantastic. Thank you, Brian, once again for joining me today. Listeners, thank you for tuning into this week's episode of The Soaring Child. I'm Dana Kay, your ADHD health practitioner. Keep on thriving. Thank you for listening to the Soaring Child podcast today. To learn more about how to help your child with ADHD soar using natural strategies, visit our website at adhdthriveinstitute.com and follow us on social media at ADHD Thrive Institute.